Well, I don't know about you, but watching the RTÉ drama Rebellion really got me thinking, what other untold stories are out there associated with the 1916 Rising? I'm meeting up with Donal Fallon, who is responsible for one of the city's most popular 1916 walking tours. Liberty Hall is where my tour is starting.
Well, often we're walking by places that are very, very familiar to us. We don't think twice about them, but they have great hidden histories, and Liberty Hall is an example of that. You know, today, 16 stories high, the workers' skyscraper, the ugliest building in Dublin. 100 years ago, it looked very different. This was an old hotel that had been taken over by two outsiders. You know, from Liverpool in England, you had Jim Larkin. From Edinburgh in Scotland, James Connolly. And this was basically the centre of trade unionism and socialism in Dublin. It was the home of the Irish Citizen Army, the Irish Transport and General Workers Union. And it was here on a crumbling old printing press that the 1916 proclamation was printed. The man who did it was called Christopher Brady. It was a dangerous thing to do. There was an armed guard on the building, the Citizen Army, and Brady was given a revolver by James Connolly for his own protection. So he got down to the business of printing that document, and in recent times they've sold at auction for huge sums of money. You know, you can get 200,000, even 300,000 euros for a 1916 proclamation in good condition. To think they were printed here.
The Abbey Theatre is our next stop. Donal tells us about the Abbey and its role. Is it true that one of the first rebels who died is associated with the Abbey Theatre?
Yeah, one of the first, and often said to be the first rebel to die in 1916 was Sean Connolly, a very talented actor here in the Abbey Theatre, and Sean was a member of the Irish Citizen Army. Now, not only was he out in 1916, his sister Katie was out, his brother Joseph, a firefighter, was out, numerous other siblings were out as well. So the Connolly family, no relation to James Connolly, they contributed enormously to the story of 1916. He shouldn't have been out in the streets at all, some would argue. He was meant to be on stage that week. He was performing in Kathleen Ní Húlaháin, a very famous Abbey play. But instead of taking his place on the stage here, he took his place on the stage of Irish history, and he died in the vicinity of Dublin Castle. He died on the roof of City Hall.
Now, there was another very famous actor, Arthur Shields, who was also involved in the Rising.
Arthur went on to great things. Arthur was from Portobello. His brother was Barry Fitzgerald, who famously won the Oscar. And they were unusual. They came from a Protestant background. Arthur was a member of the Irish Volunteers. He worked here in the Abbey Theatre, and famously he collected his rifle from here before he went on to fight in the Hibernian Bank just around the corner on O'Connell Street. He later ended up performing in How Green Was My Valley, which was an Oscar-winning film. And funnily enough, another man who was in that film was John Loder, who had been a British soldier in the streets of Dublin in 1916. So you wonder, over coffee between takes, did they talk about the 1916 Rising? Who knows?
Donal, we're here at the GPO, which must be one of the most symbolic buildings associated with the 1916 Rising.
Yeah, the GPO, Francis Johnson's beautiful 19th century post office. I say 19th century, to be honest, this is a 20th century reproduction because the building was almost totally destroyed. The only part that survives really of the original structure are the pillars, and they tell a story in themselves. But for the most part, this is a new GPO, you could say. When the rebels took over this building at 12 noon, Pearse read the proclamation just outside the GPO below the clock today, and then they raised a green flag over the roof with Irish Republic written on it in gold. So it was a kind of statement of intent, if you will. A tricolour went up as well, very familiar flag to us. Back then, not everyone understood the tricolour and its symbolism, but it dates from the 1840s. The green represents Catholic Ireland, the white represents peace, and the orange from King William of Orange, the Protestant tradition. So again, that anti-sectarian idea. We have to remember these rebels were a very diverse bunch.
How many people were in there fighting at that time?
Historians used to estimate it was around 400, but now new estimates would suggest in the region of 500 people, because people are coming and going. They're here for a brief period of time, and then they're moving on to other places. So it's a higher figure than we would have originally thought. And Jimmy Wren, who gave us a great recent study, he's pointing to around 500. My favourite of them all was Winifred Carney, James Connolly's secretary. They called her the typist with the Webley. When she walked into the GPO, she had her typewriter under her hand and her Webley revolver in the other one. So just remarkable people, men and women.
Now, while the fighting was going on, there was an awful lot happening in the streets, including pilfering as well, wasn't it?
The social context is so important. Dublin was a very different place. It was home to some of the worst tenements in Europe, some of the worst slums in Europe. So it's not surprising these people came out onto the streets and began looting to take what they can get. And the newspapers, even some of the rebels, refer to them as the rabble of the slums. They empty Cleary's, they empty Elvery's, they empty Noblet's sweet shop, Lawrence's toy shop. Anything that is a nail to the ground is taken. Now, it creates massive problems for a lot of people, but no one has a hard time of it, quite like Thomas Purcell, because he's the chief officer of the Dublin Fire Brigade, and the problem is the looters are burning buildings as they go. And we have the Fire Brigade logbook today on display in Pearse Street Public Library. We can get a sense of the chaos that week by looking at it. It's very clear Dublin was burning.
I certainly have a whole new insight into what ordinary people went through during that vital and momentous week in 1916. After the Rising, Dublin recovered with courage, with vigour, and with a vision that changed this country of ours forever.